Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you all. So today I've got a deck that's been relatively often suggested. I've been getting a lot of comments lately, really ever since Bystial's dropped, because I don't think I've actually done a deck quite like this just yet. Asking to do some combination of Thunder Dragons and or Punks, and I am bringing, of course, Bystials alongside those two archetypes here. So this deck is going to play very, very similarly to the Spright Punk deck that I was playing before the Bystials came out. It's going to play more like that deck than Bystial Spright Synchro does. Although these decks might appear very similar on the surface, they do actually end up playing out very differently. This one is a lot more combo-oriented, as in, you know, resolving the end of your main combo line tends to be more important for a deck like this than the Spright Synchro variant of Bystials, because the Spright Synchro variant, and this is what I kind of tend to like about that variant of this style of deck a little bit more, is that, you know, if your main combo line gets disrupted, you can still usually throw together like some amount of a Spright board, like Elf, IP, Red, some combination of that, right? Whereas here, if your combo gets interrupted, you can still usually extend a little bit further, but it's going to be very situationally dependent on what you can actually go into, or even if you are able to extend further than that. This is, like I said, a bit more of a combo focused deck in that regard, in that we're looking at one continuous combo line. That said, the archetypes blend very well together. The Thunder Dragons provide a great source for not only our Bystial monsters to banish stuff out of the graveyard, but of course also Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon as well. This has definitely been my favorite card the last couple of months, playing with all these different Synchro variants. It enables a lot of cool stuff like this deck here. So the kind of end board that we're trying to make with this kind of a deck is usually going to be something along the lines of like a Baron, maybe a Hope Harbinger, a Pep. This is more of a Pep Turbo deck than even our Punk Spright deck was, because again, there we also had the Spright line, kind of similar idea to Bystial Spright Synchro, but here we're a lot more focused on using Pep as our win condition a lot of the time. And, you know, if you end on a board that, you know, quote unquote only ends on like Pep plus Baron or Pep plus Colossus, that might not seem like a lot, but Psychic End Punisher, Pep PEP here, is actually like on its own a lot of the time enough to just close out the duel. I'm a big fan of towers like monsters. We also have the Avarmax here to go with our IP as well in that regard, but I'm really a big fan of quote-unquote towers monsters, monsters that are unaffected by most if not all of your opponent's effects, and a Punisher is only unaffected by activated effects, but that's usually more than enough protection. Because it can often be, especially in this meta, very difficult to out. A lot of players are having to run cards like Underworld Goddess, which we were playing too, just to make sure they have a way to, you know, out a monster like that. Now, to be fair, some other decks can do it more easily, and also Psychic and Punisher can be quote-unquote turned off by simply having less life points than your opponent, but more life points than your opponent. I said that right the first time, I think. But in any case, I do still find it to be a great boss monster, and we'll see games coming up here where this alone is enough to carry us to a victory. So we're playing Assault Synchron here, another one of my favorite cards right now. Didn't quite have room for tunings, which I would ideally like to be playing at least some, because Assault Synchron, as always, is going to be very important for a deck like this, but you can definitely still get away with plays without Assault Synchron, so it's not 100% necessary here. I am running Branded Regain and Beast here, which I'm not doing in my Bystial Spright Synchro, because we are just typically going to be doing a little more banishing with this style of a deck, particularly because we have the Thunder Dragons and Colossus. It's more likely that we are banishing not only during our turn after the Chaos Ruler, but during our opponent's turn as well, which is not the case with the Spright Synchro variant. Although I could see myself dropping the Branded Beast, potentially. I do like the Regain quite a bit in a build like this. Let's see, not much to say about the main deck. I think if you've seen any amount of me playing Punks and you know, Synchro piles, you'll be pretty familiar with how the main deck all meshes together. The extra deck is honestly relatively wide open. There are a few slots here that you could interchange with other cards. I threw in Virtual World Kyubi Shenshen because I found that making level 9 actually matters quite a bit for this deck, with the level 3 Amin as well as the level 6 Bystial monsters. I would like to find room for Beatrice, ideally. I can think of at least one situation during this playtest session with this deck where it did come up, where I was like, oh, I could make a Beatrice and it would actually be really good to send an Assault Synchron, so that way my Chaos Ruler can come back off the Assault Synchron effect when it gets banished. But I think in order to fit that in, I would probably drop one of my IP targets. I actually didn't have Avarmax in for most of this playtest session. I think I had an Appaloosa instead, just because I was trying to keep the extra deck relatively generic, but I did find myself not really being able to set up the Appaloosa very easily and just wanting the Avarmax with IP more than that. So I didn't get a chance to actually summon the Avarmax, but I do think it is right here in the extra deck. If I was going to try to slot in the Beatrice, you could make an argument for dropping Cross Sheep. This definitely doesn't come up very often at all. This is mostly just for like summoning, where you can summon Colossus in one of its zones and grab one of your tuners back for the graveyard and make a further like extension to your play. But that's relatively niche. I can see that going. Zombie Vamp is kind of the same. Like sometimes you use it as an extender to keep going, but you don't always need it. So I can see that going. Shenshen, again, not always needed, but still very useful. Funnily enough, though, all of these cards came up in my playtest session as well, so it could just be that we just don't need any further options beyond that. But I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about this list. It was a lot of fun to try this out, and this is definitely one of those decks where, like, I like this current build, but I also think it could very much be optimized, like, further from here. So, yeah, I can definitely see myself working on this in the future. But let's go ahead and just break this list down card by card, and then we'll take a look at some games. So we're on 3 Maxx, 3 Assault Synchron, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 3 Noh-P.U.N.K Amin, 3 Thunder Dragondark, 2 Noh-P.U.N.K Deer Note, 1 Thunder Dragonhawk, 2 of the Thunder Dragonroar, 1 Bystial Magnamhut, 2 Sarnoir, 1 Druiswarm, 2 Baldrake, 2 Noh-P.U.N.K Foxy 3 Noh-P.U.N.K Ogre Dance, 3 the Bystial Lubellion, 1 Branded Regained, 2 Emergency Teleport, 2 Call by the Grave, and then 1 Branded Beast. That's going to be our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Thunder Dragon Colossus, 1 Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, 1 Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon, 1 Virtual World Kyubi Shenshen, 1 Baronne de Fleur, 1 Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Chengying, 1 Psychic and Punisher, 1 at number 38 Hope Harbinger Titanic Galaxy, 1 the Zombie Vampire, 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Cross Sheep, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, 1 Knightmare Unicorn, 1 Mekk-Knight Crusaida Avarmax, and then 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. That's going to do it for this list. Now let's go ahead and look at some gameplay. For our first game, we are going to be up against Fluonderies, will be our opponent here. Now, if I recall correctly, we end up going first in this duel, and this will be a good way to establish like what kind of a turn one you can expect from a deck like this. So, a little bit unlucky to open both of our branded spell and trap cards, but also like not the end of the world or anything. We are going to start with the Emergency Teleport. Could have potentially started with Ogre Dance to test for an Ash Blossom, but even if the E-Tele gets hit with an Ash, we can just pitch the Ogre Dance and normal summon Amin anyway, so it doesn't really super duper matter how you play it out. Going to summon the Foxy the Deer Note by discarding the Foxy Tune off the Deer Note effect. You might wonder why not pull the Deer Note out of the deck, the one that's in there with the Foxy Tune. I don't want that to get negated by like an Ash Blossom or something, so I think it's safer to just pull the Deer Note out of the, or use the Deer Note effect out of the hand to summon it from there. So I'm going to bring back the Foxy Tune. It's kind of a toss-up whether or not you bring back the Foxy Tune or the Amin off the Deer Note effect. It's really hand-dependent. Sometimes I like trying to go for the Zombie Vamp, but usually I think I'll try to go for Pep, Psychic, and Punisher. Here we managed to find an Assault Synchron off of that Chaos Ruler, which is really good. So I'm going to go for a Baronne here, establishing the Omni Negate, and obviously wanting to do that. Now, we do have to destroy our own Foxy Tune because I actually don't have another light monster in the graveyard, so here I should have accounted for that, and it would have absolutely been correct to summon Amin. I would have an extra monster in play, but it's ultimately not going to be that big of a deal because we're going to get Amin out another way with this Foxy Tune that we actually just top decked here. So we're going to grab the Thunder Dragonhawk, of course, off of the Thunder Dragondark. And as I said before, we're just going to use this Foxy Tune pitch to Branded Beast. So it did ultimately cost us a Branded Beast and a card in hand to still make this Psychic and Punisher. Again, if I just grabbed the Amin off of the Deer Note, we could have kept those 2 cards. But still going to end up with pretty much the same end board here, which is Pep, Baron, and then we also get to throw down a Thunder Dragon Colossus alongside that as well, which is pretty rad. So yeah, definitely not a bad way to go into our opponent's turn here. We shut them off from searching. They still have to draw, but no searching. We have an Omni Negate, and then we have the Psychic and Punisher. Opponent's going to start with the Dimension Shifter, so I already know it's going to be either Flow, Exo, or Stun. Still going to chain the Maxx in case it is Exo Sister. Opponent's going to Extravagance, which means it's probably not Exo Sister. Setting 2 cards and passing. It's either going to be Stun or Flow, I know at this point. So drawing for turn, we managed to grab ourselves an Assault Synchron. I'm going to use Baron to pop one of my opponent's back back row, opponent's going to actually fire off a trap trick, so I definitely wasn't expecting Flandres at this point until they banished the Harpy's Featherstorm, interestingly enough. So Baron is going to pop the other back row, which is the Dreaming Town. At this point, I know they can't stop my attacks or anything with only a face-down Harpy's Featherstorm, so I'll just switch my stuff to attack mode and then smack my opponent for lethal there. So against decks like Flandres and Branded, Spright, the Thunder Dragon Colossus is very, very brutal if you can get it down on turn 1, because those decks all very much rely on searching for cards, and if they can't, their hands are often not enough to get there. Like, I'd be willing to bet, you know, like my opponent's hand probably had a lot of stuff that was normally live, like maybe a Rabina and or an Eaglin, maybe an Advent of Adventure, but of course they're not able to use any of those cards while I have the Colossus up. So very, very good in this meta in particular. Hits a lot of decks that are seeing a lot of play. And even the ones that doesn't hit particularly hard, it'll still hit most other decks incidentally for like 1 or 2 search cards. So there's that duel. Again, pretty standard turn 1 there. Let's go ahead and take a look at another game here. Okay, this time we're going to be up against a 60-card version of Branded Tier Limit. That is a deck I do plan on covering this season. I actually don't think I got around to it last season, but I know I saw a comment asking about that, so I will get to Branded Tier Limits at some point. We're going to be taking the first turn here. Again, this hand is all gas. We have Deer Note, Ogre Dance, Dragonroar, and Lubellion. Excellent hand for going first. You're going to Lubellion for the Magnamhut. I don't think it's quite as important to get Sarnoir with this deck as it tends to be for Bystial Spright Synchro. Plus, we already have a second Lubellion in hand anyway, so I feel a lot better going for the Magnamhut here. Once again, just going to set up the Amin and the Deer Note on the field, and then sync those two off for our Chaos Ruler. It might have actually been right to activate Foxy Tune instead of Deer Note here, just to discard this Thunder Dragonroar. That was a potential misplay on my part, but I am reasonably confident that with the Chaos Ruler we'll find like more relevant stuff anyway. The Thunder Dragondark, as you can see, is going to end up going to the graveyard here. So I'm going to add the Bystial Baldrake, also summoning the Foxy Tune off of Deer Note. Then I'm going to sack off the Chaos Sword to bring out my Lubellion. That way I can use Lubellion to set up the Branded Regained before I go for the Chaos Ruler here. I'm fine doing that this way. Normally I wouldn't like to do it this way, but because I didn't hit an Assault Synchron, and I can't bring back my Chaos Ruler if it gets banished anyway, I'm ultimately going to be fine with it here. This is why I say I would have liked to have put tunings in the deck. Assault Synchron is very important, not just for making like Baron, but also just for being able to recur your Chaos Ruler, which is very important. So that's why I say like I really would like to find room for tunings. Like having the 3 Assault Synchron and then also additional cards to search it might seem excessive, but I do think it does end up mattering a lot of the time. So, alright, Colossus coming down. That's going to trigger the Cross Sheep effect. This is a line where we get to see Cross Sheep in action here. Now I'm going to overlay the Lubellion and the Chaos Ruler for the Zombie Vampire, doing it this way so that way I can establish my Chaos Ruler back in the graveyard while still extending. I'm going to summon, we find an Assault Synchron actually, funnily enough, and then we get to even summon the Baldrake by banishing our opponent's Fallen of Albaz. So now I get to sync the Assault Synchron I found with the Baldrake in hand for an Assault Synchro Stardust. That'll allow us to grab back the Assault Synchron and then sync those two off for the Baronne de Fleur. Unfortunately, we've already brought back Chaos Roar with its own effect this turn, so I can't use Assault Synchron's graveyard effect this turn, but still good to go for an IP. We have the IP plus Cross Sheep to normally potentially go into Avarmax, but here I think, yeah, I still had Appaloosa in my extra deck. This was one of the games where I was like, oh, I should just have Avarmax. What am I doing with Appaloosa? So opponent is going to actually Super Poly during the main phase as their first action, so no chance to respond with the IP. They're going to go for a Dragostapelia. This is going to slightly complicate things, but I think I should ultimately still be able to play around my opponent's board here. They are going to summon an Albaz, pitching a Shiren here. Going to have to use the Baron here, mostly just to force the Dragostapelia effect before I go in for the Baldrake. The Baldrake will not only allow me to banish the Shiren, so just in case they are able to fuse for a tier limit and they want to do that, they're no longer able to. But now, on top of that, whatever they summon with the Albaz, I'm just going to banish with Baldrake's effect. And because they've already used Dragostapelia, they can't stop that. It's pretty obviously going to be a Mirror Jade here, which will wipe my board, but given how good my opponent's board is over mine right now, like my monsters are going to get wiped anyway, so I'm not concerned with Mirror Jade destroying all my stuff during the end phase here. So Mirror Jade is still going to banish my Baldrake and sending an Albion. I get to... Was that a search or a draw? I think it was a draw from Maxx, right? Yeah, it was a draw, okay. Oh no, that was a draw out of Maxx off of a Branded Regained. That's what it was. So Looks like they're using the Recurrier to add an Albion. Albion's just going to get them an extra draw here. I'm not particularly concerned about it. All my opponent really has right now is just this Dragostapelia and then whatever they set here. So, you know, this hand definitely has a lot of ammo in it. So, they get to search for a Branded Fusion here. That's not going to matter until their next turn. So here, I'm going to summon the Sarnoir by banishing the Albaz. I completely forgot that that would also, like... I thought that the Mirror Jade had already activated here, which is my bad, but if nothing else, I could set up another Lubellion in my graveyard, but I already had one, so it's not like I needed to anyway. I'm going to start by bringing back Chaos Rule with its own effect by banishing 2 of my Thunder Dragons here. I want to not only get another monster on board with the Roar, but also another draw with the Regained, and some hand sculpting with the Hawk effect as well. So I'm going to use the Roar to bring out the Hawk, and then the Hawk effect, I'm going to put back the Roar in hand, the Beast, and the Ogre Dance. Don't need any of those cards. Interestingly enough, draw a Maxx and 2 Ash Blossom. It actually tracks, given that I've thinned most of my, you know, extenders and engines in general out of my deck, so pretty much all that's going to be left is going to be like disruptions type stuff. Get to summon a Druiswarm here by banishing the Albion out of their graveyard. As you've noticed, I've been pulling just stuff out of my opponent's graveyard, just trying to make their cards like as dead as possible. So that way they can't fuse from stuff in the graveyard and whatnot. So Zambian's going to summon itself here and then sync off with the Druiswarm actually to form the Shenshen. This will allow me to use Druiswarm's effect to send the Dragostapelia on field to the graveyard. And then I'm just going to move to battle phase. I'm going to battle with the Shenshen. I even get to put back the Assault Synchron just in case I don't have lethal here, just in case I can somehow stop it, but they can't. I'm going to just smack him down, and that is going to be the game there. So there is that duel against Branded Despia, showing off some of our more niche extra deck options in the form of Cross Sheep and Shenshen, but how they can still be very useful. Still have a couple more duels to watch. Let's go into the next one here. Alright, here we have an opponent who is on tier limits. It's a standard tier limit build, except they are playing 3 hero lives to grab out Shadow Mist from deck in order to presumably search up the mask change there. Not a bad idea. I mean, it is very good in this meta, the mask change in particular. So, gonna start off with a Maxx during my opponent's draw phase. I do still very much like using Maxx on the opponent's draw phase because if you look at Triple Tactics Talent usage rate, it's at 39%. So with about 4 out of 10 games, you know, your opponent will likely have a Triple Tactics Talent. I think that's good enough odds that I'll just fire off Maxx during the draw phase. Most of the time, it is sometimes situationally dependent, but most of the time I'll just fire it off during the draw phase. Opponent is going to, fair enough, have a Maxx as well, so, you know, this is Master Duel. Unfortunately, sometimes Maxx's you just get tossed around a lot, but I feel less bad about having one for my opponent's turn 1 if they have one for mine as well. Especially because, and I've said this before recently, turn 2, the Maxx is definitely not as bad because you can often push for lethal through it. Not going to be the case here, as my opponent's going to drop a Tier Limits Crime that'll not only negate my Chaos Soul, but put it back into the deck. It'll also trigger their Shiren, but I do have a Sarnoir in hand that I'm going to use to banish that Shiren to ensure that my opponent will not be able to Fusion Summon. Moving to battle phase from here, I'm just going to hit over their Rhino Heart and then pass back over to my opponent. They do get to go up to 5 cards here. I'm going to fire off Maxx during the draw phase yet again to once again play around the Triple Tactics talent. They're going to start with a Scream and then normal summon a Havness. That's actually pretty good for me because it means they're probably going to be pretty desperate and not have a lot of resources to work with. They whiff on their mills too, which is pretty good. Super Poly will send the Shadal Beast, so they're going to try to they're presumably rather going to try to summon a Winda here, but thankfully I'm the luckiest player in the world, and I peeled a Druiswarm off the top of my deck with Maxx, so I get to banish their Havness yet again. This is the 3rd Fuser I've gotten to banish with a Bystial here, which is very nice. And look, our opponent did actually end up having talent. I'm not sure whether they had that the whole time, but this game alone was definitely enough to justify me continuing to Maxx during the draw phase moving forward. So their Druiswarm is going to battle over mine. Because they did use the Mud Dragon to switch to Dark Attribute and Druiswarm does target, I am unfortunately not able to really battle, or not battle, I'm not able to send one of their monsters when my Druiswarm gets destroyed by battle here, but I'm going to use this Magnamhut off of the Lubellion in order to start banishing their stuff, and then mostly just testing, prodding for responses here. Using the E-Telly now to go for the Amin. Amin for Foxy Tune pitching the Hawk to summon a Deer Note out of my graveyard. Gonna try, or not graveyard, deck, jeez. I'm gonna try for this Chaos Ruler thing again, and then going for the Deer Note effect in my graveyard. Gonna bring back Amin because I have a couple of bodies I can sync with here. Alright, so Chaos Ruler is now going to resolve. Let's see what we end up finding here. Is just going to be an Ogre Dance and not a whole lot else, but the Ogre Dance will still be very useful here. Syncing the Amin with the Chaos Ruler to go for a Pep. It's going to end up having a lot of attack points. At this point, they decide to just go ahead and fire off the Mud Dragon effect. Pep does target with its banishing effect, so that means I'm not going to be able to get rid of the Druiswarm that way, but what I can do is summon this Bystial Lubellion. That'll allow the Assault Synchron in my graveyard to go off, bringing back the Chaos Ruler. Now what I can do is I can activate the Ogre Dance effect to grab a Amin. I still haven't normal summoned this turn, so I can just normal summon the Amin and sync that with the Magnamhut to once again go for the Shenshen. So now the Shenshen, as long as it's in play, will banish the Druiswarm when it leaves the field, so that way it won't get to destroy one of my monsters there, or send one of my monsters there. So that will ensure that I have an easy way to find lethal here. So again, the Shenshen might seem pretty niche, but does come up for its banishing effect, as well as just being a relevant level 9 body there as well. So that is going to do it for our games. Thank you all very much for watching them, and I hope you all enjoyed this deck. I enjoyed playing with it quite a bit, and again, I think it can be further sculpted and shaped into an even more optimal... Oh wait, you know what? I think we actually have one more game. Yeah, we have one more duel. I'm sorry. I thought we were done. No, we have another game. I'm sorry about that. So let's watch that, and then we'll get into that spiel. Yeah, you'll have to forgive me there. I was definitely not trying to deprive everyone of this last game, which is going to be against Swordsoul, actually. I just looked at my timer and just completely spaced it, because we're around the time where I usually end a video. But in any case, going to be going first here. Normally Foxy Tune and, you know, no other punk monsters is actually not a combo if you open that, because we're not playing the punk that fuses. I can't remember its name off the top of my head, but because we actually opened two Foxy Tune, both of our Foxy Tunes, we still have plays here, because, you know, normally if you Foxy Tune for Amin and you don't have any other punk cards, you would want to Amin for a Foxy Tune, but then you can't activate that effect to summon Deer Note because you've already used that effect to summon the Amin. But here, because we have another punk card in hand, I can just grab Deer Note and then activate Deer Note's effect to summon itself from the hand there. So Deer Note will summon itself. We're going to go for a Chaos Ruler. Might seem like you're going a bit for broke using pretty much your whole hand to go for Chaos Ruler like this, but the amount of advantage you gain is worth it, even if it might take a lot of investment initially. So Deer Note, in this case I'm going to bring back Amin, just in case I don't find anything off the Chaos Ruler I can end on Pep, if nothing else, but here we do manage to find an Assault Synchron at the very end here, so we definitely have plays 4 days here. We're going to special Assault Synchron with its own effect, syncing it with the Chaos Ruler in order to go for our Baronne de Fleur here. Now the Chaos Ruler effect will activate, banishing the Foxy Tune and Thunder Dragondark in order to summon itself. Thunder Dragondark effect will add us a Thunder Dragonhawk. Now we'll sync the Amin with the Chaos Ruler for a Pep, Psychic, and Punisher. Fairly standard stuff thus far. We then get to use the Hawk effect from hand. Oh, and then of course Assault Synchron also gets to bring back our Chaos Ruler. Going to use the Hawk effect in order to summon a Colossus. Oh, another card I was thinking of adding to this extra deck was Spright Elf. This is particularly where it could be useful because, believe it or not, I actually did not normal summon during this turn, and I call by my opponent's Maxx, so this Maxx in hand actually isn't going to do a whole lot. So, in theory, if I had a Spright Elf in my extra deck, I could normal Maxx, link it in Chaos Ruler for the Elf. Here to link, you know, put the Baron and Colossus in the link zone so they can't be targeted, and, you know, etc., etc. So that is actually, again, yet another card for the extra deck here is Spright Elf. But it's going to start with a Chengying Spirit Ashina here. Going to link that off to go for a Monk of the Chengying. Follow that up with a Vishuda from hand. A little bit scary, but nothing I feel the need to respond to just yet. Looks like they're summoning an Adhara, and then they're going to go for the Auspice effect, tributing the Vishuda. For those who aren't familiar with Auspice, it can be special summoned by tributing a monster. It's a level 6, and then if it's used as a Synchro material, you can banish, your opponent can banish a card on the field. So I'm definitely going to use Baronne's effect here. This will not only prevent the Auspice from coming down, so that way they can't Synchro summon, but then as a result they won't be able to banish one of my monsters here. Plus, I mean, you know, there's also still the Vishuda in the graveyard too that could always banish itself to try to bounce the Baron, although now that I've used Baron, they're actually going to use the Vishuda to bounce my Colossus, so that way they can activate a Swordsoul Emergence for a Taya here. So things at this point are starting to look a little bit bad. You know, my opponent got to search now their game to make plays, using the Taya to go for a Swordsoul token, Swordsoul play. And I thought they might try to sync for the Yazi here, but they're actually going to go for the Bashia. Gonna use that to bounce back my Chaos Ruler and Baron. But we still have the Psychic End Punisher, and we're still 1,300 life points below our opponent. So I'm thinking to myself, like, all of the stuff that Swordsoul has access to, and I'm thinking, you know, I don't know that they have a very easy way at all to deal with the Psychic End Punisher. I couldn't think of one off the top of my head, because it's just unaffected by any activated effect. If my opponent was on, or rather if I was on an IP'd Avarmax, my opponent could use the Chengying to potentially banish the Avarmax because that doesn't target. And Avarmax protects itself from targeting and destruction, but not non-targeting, non-destruction effects. So, but the End Punisher, again, as long as my life points are equal to or less than my opponent's, they are not able to do anything to it with activated effects. Opponent is going to make a valiant effort to try to battle over my Punisher here by making the Chengying anyway, and its continuous effect does still apply to my Punisher. However, when my opponent moves to battle phase, my Punisher effect will increase its own attack points. And here, as you can see, my opponent tried to battle into my Punisher to make their life points less, but the way that they battled and the way the attack points ended up working out, they set themselves equal to me after running in their own monster. So that means, unfortunately for them, that they are not able to... It looks like they were trying to do was use the Vishuda in Graveyard in order to bounce back my Psychic End Punisher. But again, after the attack, our life points were still equal, so my Punisher was still unaffected. They couldn't go lower in life points without running either their Chengying or their Monk of the Tenyi into my Punisher, at which point they can no longer use Vishuda. Well, actually, they could have run the Chengying in and then used then their life points would have been lower. Then main phase 2 used Vishuda to bounce my End Punisher. That would have actually done it, but I guess they either didn't see that line or didn't think they had a good enough follow-up. I mean, to be fair, I didn't have anything in hand at all. But I did have a few things in Graveyard, so like, I don't know. It might have been a bit of a misplay on my opponent's part, but even if they'd played correctly, they obviously wouldn't have won this turn, and they would have been in a bit of a tough spot. So, I'll leave it up to you to figure out how well that was played or not, I guess. But that's going to go ahead and do it for our duels now, for real this time. So, thank you all for watching. Let's move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic fantastic day.